What's up, guys? Welcome back. Today we have another head-to-head video. So we've got the Sharknivco mini goblin and the Koenig mini goblin. So if you are not familiar with Sharknivco, that is Edison Barajas and his wife Mariella. Edison is the knife maker. Mariella runs basically the rest of the company. And this is his design. And then they went and they worked with Koenig to do a kind of a mid-tech version of the knife. The interesting thing about this head-to-head is that I have experienced a lot of production or mid-tech versions of custom knives. And usually there's similarities. You can basically tell it's a production knife version of it. But they're quite similar, definitely cut from the same cloth, if you will. These almost feel like two completely different knives, like night and day difference. The only thing that they share is the shape, even though they're titled the same thing and hypothetically the same model made by two companies. That's pretty interesting about these knives, and we'll get into that more. I will say right off the bat that I am biased towards the Sharknivco. And that is because I love Sharknivco. The Waka is my favorite EDC of all time. I have it right here. And I am a coin holder in the group. I also admin for the group. So I am biased toward the Sharknivco. So just so you know. But I also think this is a significantly better knife than the Koenig. So let's talk about the general knife design. It is a small Wharncliffe knife that is obviously kind of a specialty build or a specialized build built for the purpose of, this draw cut. It's this arrowhead type shape and has basically a very fine point to pierce material and basically drag through. And I said it was small, so I'll show you some size comparisons. So we've got the PM2. PM2 is significantly larger than both. It is almost the identical size to a PM3. Much more cutting edge, but there's your size comparisons. And we have a guest size comparison because I like to do some standard stuff everybody handles, but then I just grabbed something out of my drawer that I thought would be funny to compare, and that is the Shirogorov 111. So as you can see, this is quite a small knife compared to the 111. I do carry this pretty frequently, so carrying this feels funny. Anyways, those are your size comparisons. So we talk about the general knife design, and the general knife design is basically the only similarities that these two knives have. And that's why I think this is an interesting head-to-head, because I had never handled either of these knives. Even though I'm a big Sharknivco fan, I'd never handled one of these until very recently. And this was mine, and this was Rob's. Rob actually sent this to me for this video in particular, and I will be sending him this one back. We agreed on a trade, and I like this significantly more, and he has another one, and he wants another Koenig mini goblin in his collection. So let's talk about the differences between these knives, which is numerous. First off, right off the bat, you will notice that this has a flipper tab, this has a thumb stud. Other thing you will notice is this is carbon fiber, this is titanium. That is minor. These are made in carbon fiber as well. I just prefer the plain Jane one. I will mention too, this is actually a prototype of the mini goblin. He has his normal versions now, but this is a prototype, so a very early example, his marked prototype. Other differences obviously is hardware, and that will come into play in a little bit here when I give ratings on these knives. Obviously, this has all proprietary hardware, utilizing a unique, 6-hole kind of spanner thing, and then the 3-hole standard body screws that Eddie uses on the Waka as well. I think he uses on the Ryu, and then the captured other side of those. So really cool proprietary hardware that Edison makes himself, and then the Koenig uses just your standard Torx. I don't know if this is captured on this side. Yep. So those are those differences. The blade seals are different. This is M390. This is RWL 34. That is one advantage that the Koenig has over the Sharknivco. I think that M390 is quite a bit better than RWL 34, but that's my personal opinion. Lots of people like RWL 34. It is a less hard steel, probably less performant, technically easier to maintain. Another difference you will see in these knives is the lock bar size. The Koenig has a smaller or less tall lock bar than the Sharknivco. The Sharknivco also has this kind of signature contouring around the pivot for that lock bar, which also exists on the Waka, as well as the Shiru, which is another model of theirs. So that's kind of a signature thing. There's no contouring around that pivot for this lock bar, but it is also smaller, so it wouldn't really make sense. Another difference is this is kind of, it's a very classic Koenig pocket clip. I had the same one on my areas, are very similar, that might be modified slightly to look more like the Sharknivco one. But they are quite different and they perform quite different. This is a much better pocket clip, spoiler alert. I brought up the flipper tab and the thumb stud. This uses a flipper tab. This uses a thumb stud. You can also front flip this one. I tightened up the detent on this, so it is harder to front flip, especially because I have a hard time getting my fingers off of that lock bar, and that is one disadvantage of the Sharknivco over the Koenig. The Koenig is easier to deploy, a little bit less finagly with that lock bar pressure, especially because of flipper tab. I feel like it is natural to pinch it more, and because their lock bar is smaller, it's easier to deploy. Another difference you will see is actually the general handle shape. So this has obviously this peak here because there's a flipper tab. This does not, and that means that the general ergonomics are actually quite different on these knives. What that means also for the Koenig though is that the lock bar access is better. There is jimping here and there is a slight cutout there and a ramp for the lock bar access, so it is easier to access. So and this, there is no lock bar access. It is a very, sleek contour, but it does feel like you have to kind of dig your finger in there to disengage it. So those are kind of the major, just on the surface differences. I guess not on the surface differences. These are very different knives. Like I said, I've never experienced a production or mid-tech version of a custom knife that was so different. And the main key difference between these two knives is their thickness. If you look at the Koenig, I think that the Koenig is a good 30% thicker all the way around. And what that means is that for the Koenig, in my opinion, it actually ruins the purpose of this design. So most of the knives that I collect and carry are usually pretty generalized knives. And what I mean by that is they are general EDC knives. They're pretty good at everything, not masters at anything. This is definitely a specialized knife. It is the master, this design is the master of, like I said, the draw cut. So this is like a box opener. That's just kind of how I view this knife, and with the size and the way with the size and kind of the way the ergos are set up, it's made to be pierced into material and draw cut, right? And the Sharknivco is really excellent at that. It is a thin blade stock. It has this really natural spot for your finger, the ergonomics. It fills your hand nicely. Your back fingers grab here, and it just feels like it's supposed to be drawn through material. The problem with the Koenig is that you have this flipper tab, so you lose the capability of getting up on the knife really easily and comfortably. This choil is way too small. You'll definitely cut yourself. And the other problem is the blade stock thickness. I do not understand why Koenig made such a thick blade. For this type of knife design, it's the blade stock thickness of I think it's thicker It is thicker than the 111, barely, but it is. This is this is a 4.25 inch knife. Why would you make a knife that is supposed to pierce material and pull through it very easily, such thick blade stock? I know it's a hollow grind, but honestly, with the hollow grind, then it just has the disadvantages of thin blade stock, and then the disadvantages of thick blade stock because of the design of this knife. It just makes no sense to me. Whereas with the Sharknivco, you have this thin blade stock that is flat ground and just pulls through material super easily, whereas the thick spine on this really affects that performance. As I'm talking about this, I noticed another difference I hadn't brought up. The backspacer. This is a very Koenig backspacer, and this is a very Sharknivco backspacer. So I like this better. That's personal preference, but just thought I would show that. So with the thickness of the knife, then comes the other problem with the Koenig. These are small knives. I already showed that. But this feels like, because of how thick it is, it feels like carrying a D-cell battery in your pocket. And that's because it's small, but also it's so thick that it sticks, like you feel it in your pocket. You don't get the advantage of it being a small knife and disappearing in your pocket. And with this pocket clip, with how the mounting is, you stick up this much out of your pocket. So it feels like it doesn't belong in your pocket because it's so thick, and then it feels like it's going to fall out of your pocket. Whereas the thinness of this, and that extra like 4 millimeters maybe, it disappears in your pocket as a small knife should. So basically you're getting the disadvantages of a small knife and the disadvantages of a big knife with the Koenig, whereas the Sharknivco really is like, I'm a small knife, I'm used for one thing. So if you're going to do a specialized design, it is imperative that you get basically the material thickness right, is kind of just what I'm saying here. So I think that is a really interesting difference between these knives, and because of that, they feel like totally different knives, even though they share the same knife, or same name. They both, and some design elements, obviously that Wharncliffe blade, the Shark looks different slightly. It's a little flatter. This is a little more, upswept. They both have lock bar inserts, which is, I think I like how Edison did his kind of subtly. So you have the protection from, over travel from disengaging the lock. I like that on this one because it's kind of hard to disengage already. So you're pushing kind of hard. So that's a great little feature. So yeah, they're really similar knives, but they're technically the same knife made by two makers, but they feel completely different. And I much prefer this because it's built around the specialized design, whereas this feels like it just was slapped together with materials they had for the Arius, honestly. So with all that being said, also I wanted to say, this is really well made. It's not poorly made. Like, the fit and finish is fantastic. The action's great. All that stuff. It feels like they spent time making this, which is funny because it feels like it doesn't make sense because of all that thickness. And of course, this is really well made. I tightened the D10 on this. It's a little bit over tightened, but I like a tighter D10. So I might have tightened that a little bit too much, which makes the action not as good as it should have been. But that's my bad. That's not their design issue. So as I struggled to disengage the lock bar, and that's because of that lack of lock bar access. That's kind of my one gripe with this one. So after all that talking, let's just give these some ratings, and I'll talk you through why I gave each of these the scores that I did. So first off, for carryability, I gave the Sharknivco a 7 and the Koenig a 3. The Sharknivco has the advantages of a small knife when you're carrying it. It weighs 2.8 ounces and is thin, and it disappears in your pocket. The pocket clip could be a little bit better, but because it's such a light and small knife, it's not a big deal. I just like a little more tension on my pocket clip, but it didn't move at all when it was in my pocket. This, I already brought this up because it's so thick, and the pocket clip, it sticks out so far. It's terrible to carry, in my opinion. Like, it just feels like it doesn't belong in your pocket. So I gave it a 3. And it weighs 3.2 ounces. Not heavy, but just something to note. It is interesting too, because this is a carbon fiber scale and this is all titanium, but this is much thinner. Also, they both do have milling on the inside, but Edison's milling is remarkable. Like, there's so much milling. I had this apart last night. I actually took a picture of it, so I'll throw that picture in here so you can see how much milling is done on the inside to achieve 2.8 ounces for a full titanium knife. Second part is usability. For the specialized design that this is, which is those kind of pierced draw cuts like opening boxes and such, this got a 7 because it's really good at that. I think the ergos are great for that. You have really good kind of pinch access to do that, and I think it's excellent for that specialized use. And then the Koenig actually got a 4 for usability. I just think that all of those, I mean, it will cut obviously, but it really is not usable as, it's not very good at the thing it was designed to do, which is those pierce and draw cuts because of that thick blade stock. And then you can't really get up on that blade either because of that flipper tab, so it didn't score well there for. And then lastly, this is the only place where the Koenig has a leg up on the Sharknivco in my opinion, and that is maintainability. So I'll start with the Koenig here. This got a 6 for maintainability. It's got the standard hardware. This might be free spinning, which is kind of annoying, but not a huge deal. It's got standard hardware all the way around, and then so average there. But it has got a Wharncliffe blade, which they're very easy to sharpen. You just draw it straight back. You don't have to do anything with your wrist when you're on stone. So you got a 6, a little bit above average. The Sharknivco, on the other hand, got a 3 for maintainability, and that is because of the proprietary hardware. I love the look of the proprietary hardware used, and I don't actually mind it on custom knives, but in the long run, when it comes down to the brass tacks, makes it harder to maintain, especially with knives like this, because the Sharknivco tools for taking these apart are extremely rare. I have owned a Waka for over a year at this point, and I just was able to purchase a set of tools for that. And I'm fine purchasing tools for things, but they are really hard to get. And Edison and Mariella have acknowledged that, and they're working on making them easier to get. They're not easy to make is the thing, and they're two-man show. So for the amount of knives that they're turning out, basically they haven't been able to make enough tools. I fortunately have the tools to take this apart, but with that very limited availability, I can't give this a good score on maintainability. Also, I mean, on top of that, the bearings that they always use are non-caged bearings, so taking it apart you have to be extra careful, blah blah blah. The only reason I didn't get a 2 actually was because of Wharncliffe blade. Wharncliffes are easy to sharpen, so I gave it an extra point for that. But having those proprietary hardware, it really does affect the maintainability, right? Because it's harder to maintain because you can't take it apart, obviously. Again, that's fine. I'm totally okay with that. I will buy into the tools, but when they're really hard to get, that can, I can't give it a good score on maintainability. So that's those knives. That's the Koenig Mini Goblin and the Sharknivco Mini Goblin. I obviously think that this is a much better knife. It scored a total of 17, so a little bit above average if you think 15's average, because that'd be 3 5s. And then this scored a 13. The only way that this one, or the only category this one out in is maintainability, which makes sense with that proprietary hardware. So that is those knives head to head. If I had to choose one, obviously I would choose this one. I think it's a significantly better knife. The choices in material thickness really affects this knife in having a flipper tab. So it's not nearly as good as the original. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. I think these are really cool knives. Thank you, Rob, for sending me this mini Goblin for this video. Appreciate you a bunch, and I will catch you all on the next one.